So this will serve as your pre-recorded video or video lecture for pertaining to another system that we will be discussing, and that would be respiratory system. So in midterm quarter, we've already discussed this is actually three system that is very important in your field, and that would be circulatory system, female and male reproductive system. So now let's proceed to another system that we will be discussing, and that would be very, very important in your field, and that would be respiratory system. Before we will discuss, and we will be going to be amazed to this kind of system, let's discuss first, or let's answer first the question, what is respiratory system? So when we say respiratory system, it is basically the network of organs and tissues that help you breathe. So for example, when you are inhaling and exhaling, that is a good way, or that is a good example of the function of respiratory system. Without respiratory system, the breathing process is not can be comply, or it is not being function. So that's why it's very important to know that the respiratory system is actually included as your airways. So possibly when we say airways, these are the organ that is possesses or helping you to breathe. So what are those? We have number one organ is the lungs. So lungs, and of course the blood vessels. So basically the muscles that power your lungs are also part of respiratory system, and these parts also work together to move oxygen throughout the body and clean out waste gases like carbon dioxide. So as I've said a while ago, the system that is actually helps you to inhale and exhale an oxygen and remove or discrete an carbon dioxide is a respiratory system. So it's very important for you to know the function or the main function of each system, because it is included in your major subject or in your major field. Number one is the male and female reproductive system, and in that system, as you can see, or as you observe, it is also has a supply and drainage. So same what in the respiratory system, it has also have a supply and discrete supply for oxygen and discrete for carbon dioxide. So that would be the main function or the main definition of respiratory system. Again, when we say respiratory, it is a network of organs and tissues that help you breathe. So the process inhaling and exhaling is the help of our respiratory system. So now let's move forward to the next slide. So we have respiratory system is actually consists of respiratory and conducting zones. So what are those respiratory and conducting zone? We have respiratory zone and conducting zone. So what is the differences between this zone? Okay, so when we say the differences between respiratory and conducting zone, respiratory is a site of gas exchange. So meaning to say, here in particular zone, the gaseous exchange or the exchanging of gas is occur. Not only that, it also consists of bronchioles, alveolar ducts, and alveoli. So what is particularly function of it? Basically, the function of respiratory zone in the respiratory system is to diffuse oxygen. When we say diffuse, it is a exchanging of oxygen molecules from the alveoli sac to the circulatory system. That's why here in the respiratory system, the system that's somewhat connected in this system is circulatory system, skeletal system, and muscular system. So basically here we will be mentioning some of the parts or the flow of the blood, particularly on the circulatory system in the respiratory system, kasi as I've said a while ago, it has a connection. Okay? So when we say respiratory system, it is a site of gas exchange, meaning to say it has a diffusion of oxygen. And it usually occur in what particular part? It is in the alveoli sac to the circulatory system. And of course, respiratory zone also is consists of bronchioles, alveolar ducts, and alveoli. So what is this? This is actually a part or an organ of respiratory system. Why? Because if we literally examine the anatomy of respiratory zone, it is basically a separation of a conducting zone, which is in the nose to bronchioles, and a respiratory zone, which is also called as alveolar duct to alveoli. So meaning to say, when we say respiratory zone, it is much more on the gas exchange. It takes place, which takes place, or the oxygen that has been diffuses. And when we say conducting zone, it is much more focused or arises in the nose to bronchioles. So what happened in this? When we say conducting zone, from the word itself, conducting, it is from a path for conduction of the inhaled gases and respiratory zone. So meaning to say, it includes all the respiratory structure like nose, nasal cavity, pharynx, and trachea. So that is the differences between respiratory zone and conducting zone. Okay, again, when we say respiratory zone, it is much more focused on the exchanges of gases. It takes place in that kind of zone. When we say conducting zone, from the word itself, conducting, it is a path of conduction basically that basically occur when you inhale gases through the respiratory zone. So that is the difference between the two, and the difference between the two is particularly on the parts or the organ that they've been occurring. So meaning to say, in the respiratory zone, they usually occur in the alveolar duct to alveoli, and when we say conducting zone, the inhaling gas to the respiratory zone usually occur in the nose to bronchioles. So when we say nose to bronchioles, it is particularly on the nasal cavity, nose, pharynx, and trachea. So that is the two types or consisting of respiratory system, the respiratory and conducting. So meaning to say, respiratory system is functionally separated by the respiratory zone and conducting zone. Okay? So if you have questions about this, you can raise it in our GC. So next, we have respiratory muscle. What is this? So respiratory muscles is actually been explained as a diaphragm and other muscles that promote ventilation. What does it mean? It means that, so meaning to say, when we say it means when we say a respiratory muscle, it involves specific exercise that requires either inspiration or expiration, or it is about stimulating your respiratory muscles. So how does it occur, or where does it occur? It basically occur in the three respiratory muscle, and that would be the diaphragm, the rib cage muscle, and the abdominal muscle. So what happened in these three muscles or three respiratory muscles, particularly on this part? So each group acts on the chest walls and its compartment. So the lung oppose rib cage, the diaphragm oppose rib cage to the abdomen. So that is the connection between the three muscles. So basically, here in the three muscles, it's just promoting ventilation. What do you mean by ventilation? So meaning, when we say ventilation, basically it is all about the circulation or exchanging of gases throughout the lungs to the basic respiration. So that's why when we say respiratory muscle, it's much more focused on the exchanging of gas or promoting a ventilation, which is explained as an exchanging of gas to the lungs throughout the respiration. So that is respiratory muscles, and it has the three muscles again. We have the rib cage, the diaphragm, and the abdominal muscle. So meaning to say, the exchanging of gas occurs in your diaphragm. Why? Because diaphragm oppose your cage, lungs oppose your rib cage, and diaphragm oppose your rib cage through the abdomen. So that is the what they call this, the part or the location where the gases exchange in the respiratory muscle. So it occur in the location lungs, rib cage, and diaphragm. Okay? Or diaphragm, rib cage, and abdominal muscle. Sorry, there's no lungs pala. Lungs oppose the rib cage only. But the three muscles is diaphragm, rib cage, and abdominal muscles. Okay? So that would be the respiratory muscles. So now let's proceed. So this is basically an illustration on how you inhale and exhale the oxygen, on how you inhale an oxygen and how you exhale a carbon dioxide, how you supply oxygen and how you excrete a carbon dioxide. So it's gas enter first into your nasal cavity and through forth, or etc. So this would be the organs or the major organs in the respiratory system, beginning with or starting with the nasal cavity, nostril, oral cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, right primary bronchus or right primary bronchi, site of carina. We have right lung and left primary bronchi, left lung, and diaphragm. So this would be the what they call this, the major organs in respiratory system. Okay, so as you can see here, we have, let's focus first with the lungs. So as you can see for the lungs, a bit reminded or a theory in the lungs or trivia in the lungs. So as you can see, we have two lungs here. They're actually twins, and all of these two parts or this separation of the lungs is called a lobe. So we have the right lobe and the left lobe. And fun fact on this, we have three lobes on the right and we have two lobes on the left. And as you can see here in the left, there is a cardiac notch. Why? Because it is served as a bit of part which your heart is located. So here in the left side, we have a cardiac notch. So meaning to say it is a part wherein you can see your heart. It is actually an intention to give a heart a room in that part. So like I've said a while ago, it is a cardiac notch because it is the location of your heart. For it's basically explains that an intention for us to see our heart in a dissection process. So fun fact again, your left lung is actually quite small if we compare it to your right lung. Okay, so that is basically a fun fact regardless to your lungs. So again, there is two parts of your lungs, and that is right lobe and left lobe. So each lobe, for the right lobe, it has three lobes, and for the left lobe, we only have two lobes. And we have in the left lobe also we have a cardiac notch, meaning to say this is basically the intention for us to see our heart. Okay, that would be the location of the heart. And remember that the lobe is a twin, but it is not actually an identical. Basically, unidentical. Why? Because they actually differ in their sizes. Okay, as I've said, left lung is much more smaller than the right lung. So that would be the representation of respiratory system. So now let's move forward to the function of respiratory system. So here, basically, I've already give you a hint pertaining to this in the first slide. So what is the major function? The major function is to supply the body with oxygen and dispose a carbon dioxide. So meaning to say, we will be inhaling an oxygen and we will be exhaling a carbon dioxide. So always remember that carbon dioxide is not good in your body because it is a waste. So that's why we need to discrete, or we need to exhale, or we need to move or remove, to be exact, the carbon dioxide. So aside from that, so when we say respiratory system, respiration is occur. It has a four distinct process which happen. So what are those process in the respiration? Number one is the pulmonary ventilation. What happened to the pulmonary ventilation? So when we say ventilation, it is a circulation and exchanging of gases to the lungs throughout your body. So what is the function of pulmonary ventilation? It is for moving an air into and out of the lungs. So in pulmonary ventilation, it is exchanging a gas into and out of the lungs. Next, we have external respiration. When we say external, it is outside. So meaning to say it is a gas exchange between the lungs and the blood. Okay? So it is particularly on changing of gases, particular on our lungs through the blood. Then we have transport. When we say transport, very easy from the word itself, transport. So it basically explains transportation. When we say transportation, anong gina-transport niya, ma'am? Ang gina-transport niya basically is the supplying of oxygen and the excretion of carbon dioxide. Meaning to say, respiration transport your oxygen and excreting your carbon dioxide between the lungs and the tissue. Then lastly, we have internal respiration. Here, in internal respiration, it is basically on the or inside. So when we say internal respiration, it is basically explains the exchanging of gases between systematic blood vessels through the tissue. Okay? So that would be the four part or four process that must be happen in respiration. Okay? So what is the differences between external respiration and internal respiration? So basically the differences between these two respiration is that when we say internal respiration, it usually occurs in your body tissue where you releases a carbon dioxide and take in an oxygen from the blood. Where the external respiration, it usually occurs in the lungs and it occurs when the body takes in oxygen from the atmosphere and releases carbon dioxide. That's why it's called external respiration because it is in the outside. It is pertaining on the exhaling of oxygen from inhaling of oxygen from the atmosphere, and we will release a carbon dioxide. That's why it's called external. And when we say internal, it usually release carbon dioxide that and take an oxygen from the blood. So internal, we have body tissue. External, we have lungs and blood. Okay? So that is the differences between external respiration and internal respiration. Okay, let's move forward to the next slide. We have the function of the nose. Okay, the function of the nose is very easy. Why? Because it is usually very visible. It is externally visible, meaning to say we can actually see it with our naked eye, and it is a part of respiratory system that function as ano. Number one, it's providing an airway for respiration. What do you mean by airway? It is basically explains as the passageway of the oxygen throughout your body. So meaning to say you will inhale through your nose, moistening and warming the entire entering of air. That is also the part or the function of the nose. And basically, as you can see, the internal part of the nose, we have a different we have a hair in that internal part. So basically that hair will protect those oxygen that you will usually inhale in the outside or in the environment. So that's why it is also function as moistening and warming the entering of air because of that. Filtering inspired air and cleaning it of foreign matter. That's why I've said a while ago that there are parts of your nose that basically can filter or can know that it is a clean air or can filter air. So what are those? We have hair, buhok sa ilong. Yung buhok sa ilong ninyo ang nagsisilbing protection sa mga sa hangin na i-inhale ninyo. Okay? Siya yung protection, siya yung nag-filter, siya yung nag-clean. Okay? The next, we have housing the olfactory receptors. What do you mean by that? So meaning, if we are basically explaining the housing the olfactory receptor, we will basically unlock first what is olfactory receptor. When we say olfactory receptor, it is a protein capable of binding on odor molecules that plays a central role in the sense of smell. So that's why one good function of the nose is olfactory receptor, kasi basically here we can identify the odor if it is not good or if it is good, particularly on the smell. So that is the purpose of the housing of the olfactory receptors. Again, when we say olfactory receptors, basically it is an odor molecules. It plays essential role, or it plays a role in the sense of smell. So that basically the function of the nose. So if you have questions, clarifications, you can ask it in our GC. So now let's proceed to the function of the, to the part of the nose. So we have the external portion. So in the external portion of the nose, we have three. Number one, mainly cartilage attached to nasal bones. That is external portion. Number two, external nares or nostrils. Number three is the vestibules, or it is just inside the external nares, or you can put your finger in that vestibules. Okay? So for further explanation of the portion regardless to the external portion, so this is the illustration here. Okay? So this is basically the external portion of the nose. We have the frontal bone, which is located in your frontal head. We have the nasal bone, the septal cartilage, the maxillary bone, or the frontal process of the nose. This is pertaining to the external portion, ha? We have lateral cartilage, the lesser alar cartilage, and the greater alar cartilage. So as you can see here, you can basically see or identify the portion pertaining to the external of our nose. And lastly, we also have the dense fibrous connective tissue. So this is the organ particularly on the external portion of your nose. So basically, when we say a cartilage, it has many functions. It is including the ability to resist compressive forces. So it is a part of the bone that usually provides support in your bony area where there is a need for flexibility. So that's why your nose, if you literally, what you call this, hinahawakan nyo yung nose nyo, it is somewhat, you can move it, it's very flexible. You can put your finger inside of your nose because of the cartilages. Okay? So that is the external portion of the nose. So if you have questions, clarifications, again, you can send it or you can ask it or raise it in our GC. Okay? Thank you so okay, so now let's move to the internal portion of the nose. So the internal portion of the nose, we have internal nares, the nasal septum, the paranasal sinuses, the meatus, and the olfactory region. When we say internal nares, it usually connects nose to pharynx. So when we say it is a connection or it connects the nose to pharynx, it is basically the opening part of the internal portion. When we say opening part of the internal portion, it is from the nasal cavity to your pharynx. Okay? So it is basically two openings from your nostrils to external nares. So basically, external nares is much more focused of the connection between your nose and your pharynx. So it usually the opening. It is usually the opening of your internal portion in the nasal cavity into the pharynx. So meaning to say, when we say opening, it is particularly on internal nares. Okay? So to explain it in an easiest way, external nares is the opening of the nose. Nares means opening of the nose. We have two part, external, particularly on or anterior part, and when we say internal, particularly, or it is also known as posterior part. So next we have nasal septum. When we're trying to figure out what is nasal septum, it is basically the division of nasal cavity in a two portion. So basically, when we say trying to figure out what is this division, it is a separation of your cartilage, and it will divide into two. And what is this separation? This is a separation of two chambers. Okay, like in your straight line of your nose. So as you can see, the straight line of your nose, that is the nasal septum. That straight line of your nose is a division of the cartilages. So when we say division of the cartilages into two separate chamber, that is also called as nasal septum. Okay? Yung mahaba, yung length ng ilong nyo, yan po ang tinatawag na nasal septum. Sa nasal septum po, may separation po yan sila. Nagsiseparate po yan silang dalawa into two chambers. Okay? So we also have the paranasal sinuses. This is usually the cavities formed by cranium, frontal, sphenoidal, maxillary, and ethmoidal. Okay, so this is the cavities that form by your cranium. So what is cranium? So when we say cranium, so as you can see in the external portion of your nose, we have frontal bone, di ba? So cranium is the bone that form in your head. Okay? Cranium is made up of cranial bones. It is usually a protection of your facial bones from your eye socket, nose, cheeks, jaw, and the other parts of your face. So that is paranasal sinuses. We also have the meatosis. It is a passageways formed by a conchae, superior, middle, or inferior. So what does it mean? So if we explain it to an anatomy way, when we say meatosis or meatus, is it basically a natural body opening or a canal. So it is usually explains or refer to external meatus and external meatus that begins in the opening of your ear canal through your nose. So as you can see, di ba, if we are having inhaling or exhaling of oxygen, usually it also connects to our ears, di ba? Kahit yung simple na mag-release tayo mag-release tayo ng waste na galing sa ilong. Pag nag-release tayo ng waste galing sa ilong, ang mangyayari na dedepektuhan ang tenga mo. 'Di ba? So that is the connection between your ear, your frontal bone, and your nose. So that's why we have cartilages here to protect our face from your eye socket through the entire part of your face. Okay? So we have also the olfactory region. It is above superior concha. So I'm literally always mentioning the conchae or concha. When we say conchae, it is basically a shape like an elongated seashell, which give in a Latin word it is called as concha, but in an English word it's called conchae. Huh? Yeah, it is any of the scrolled spongy bones of your part or internal portion of your nose. Okay. Oh, so that is the olfactory region. So meaning to say, in olfactory region, it is basically the passageway of your inhaling your oxygen. So it is a passageway, it is a canal. So it is a region where your air enters. Okay? So that is olfactory region. So now let's move forward to the nasal cavity. Nasal cavity, also known as respiratory mucosa. So it is lines the balance of the nasal cavity. So this is actually a part of nasal cavity pala. Respiratory mucosa. So it glands secrete mucus containing lysozyme to help destroy bacteria. So what is this respiratory mucus? So what is this respiratory mucosa? So meaning to say, when we say mucus, it is basically a membrane or a part of a tissue. So it is a mucous membrane that lining your respiratory tract, including the nasal cavity, the larynx, and the trachea. And usually, it can be enters also in the bronchi or the bronchi tree, kasi meron tayong primary, secondary, bronchi. Okay? So that is respiratory mucosa. Again, when we say respiratory mucosa, it is a mucous membrane that lining your respiratory tract. It is a type of a tissue. Okay? Moving forward. So this is particularly or an illustration with your nasal cavity. Okay? That's it. So now let's move. Another illustration with different part of nasal cavity. Okay. So now let's move forward to pharynx. So pharynx is usually the funnel-shaped tube of skeletal muscle. It is usually connects to the nasal cavity and mouth superiorly. It connects to nasal cavity superiorly. It connects to larynx inferiorly. When we say superiorly, it is located in an upper body or upper portion. When we say inferiorly, it is located in the lower portion. It usually extends from the base of the skull to the level of the 6th cervical vertebra. Okay, so that is pharynx. So why it is extend from the base of the skull to the level of the 6th cervical vertebrae? So the only answer of that if we literally explain the function of it, pharynx usually is the muscular tube in the middle of your neck. So meaning to say, as you can see, it is usually connected or extends up to your skull, to your cervical vertebrae. So when we say cervix, this is your neck. So it usually helps you to breathe and digest food. So that is why pharynx is also a major organ of digestive system and also a major organ of the respiratory system. Why? Because it helps not only to digest food, it also helps it pertaining on your breathing process. Okay? So usually the major or the medical issues that can affect that part is, for example, if you have common cold, yan. So if you want to protect your pharynx, you have to quit or you have to not avoid smoking, because smoking can give infection. So that can give you a medical issue pertaining to your pharynx. And number one issue is the common cold. Okay, so that is pharynx. Next, pharynx is divided into 3 regions. We have nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. So let's discuss it one by one. So when we say nasopharynx, it is usually lies on posterior to the nasal cavity and inferior to the sphenoid and superior to the level of soft palate. It is usually strictly an air passageway. That's why it's called nasopharynx, because it is a passageway. It is basically located in your nasal cavity. The line or the membrane that line in the nasopharynx is called pseudostratified columnar epithelium. That's why it is a membrane. That's why it's called epithelium, because it is a mucous membrane, or it is a membrane, soft lining membrane, and it is called as pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Closes during swallowing to prevent food from entering the nasal cavity. So that lining is like a wall. It usually closes if we are swallowing or chewing a food for us to prevent, for the food to prevent entering to the nasal cavity. And here in nasopharynx, we also have pharyngeal tonsil or an adenoid in other term. It is lies high on the posterior wall of the pseudostratified columnar epithelium. We also have the pharyngotympanic or auditory, or it is like a tube opens into the lateral wall. So what is particular differences between pharyngeal tonsil and pharyngotympanic? Tympanic or the auditory. So in pharyngeal tonsil, it is actually lying, or it is actually a tissue lying to the midline along the roof of the posterior wall in the nasopharynx. Okay, and it usually consists of occipital bones, while a pharyngotympanic tube, it is a tubal tonsil, which is located just in posterior. So posterior to pharyngeal opening of the auditory tube in the nasopharynx. So that is the differences between the two. Pharyngeal tonsil is an adenoid. It is consists of occipital bones, and it usually in the midline or in the roof of posterior wall that is located in nasopharynx. While when we say pharyngotympanic tube, it is a tubular tonsil, meaning to say it is just a posterior of the pharyngeal opening, or it is an auditory tube in the nasopharynx. Okay, so that is the differences between pharyngeal tonsil and pharyngotympanic or the auditory tubes. So now let's proceed to oropharynx. So in oropharynx, it extends inferiorly from the level of the soft palate to the epiglottis. So what do you mean by soft palate? So when we say soft palate, it is usually consists of muscle fibers, and it is usually a connective tissue. It is so basically, if when we say a tissue, it is a mucous membrane consisting a stratified squamous epithelium. Okay, it is usually a secretory salivary glands. Okay, so that is particularly on the soft palate. So unlike to the hard palate, the soft palate is very flexible, and it actually does not contain any bony structure. That's why it's called soft palate. So meaning to say, when we say oropharynx, it is usually located in the inferiorly or the level of the soft palate to the epiglottis. So what do you mean by epiglottis? Epiglottis is another term in oropharynx. So epiglottis is basically also a part of cartilages. So meaning to say, it is a flap that covers the trachea during swallowing so that the food does not enter to the lungs. So if in nasopharynx, we have this so-called pseudostratified columnar epithelium for us to prevent the food to enter in the nasal cavity. Here, the food that is not should enter to the lungs is the function of epiglottis. Okay, so oropharynx also serve as a common passageway for food and air. So it is not only a passageway of air, but hence it is also a passageway of your food. The epithelial lining or the epithelium lining of oropharynx is a stratified squamous epithelium, and it also have the fosses. When we say fosses, it is an opening toward the mouth, the palatine tonsils, and the lingual tonsils. Okay, so but before that, let's unlock first the differences between pseudostratified columnar epithelium and stratified squamous epithelium. When we say pseudostratified columnar epithelium, it is basically responsible for protecting foreign particles. When we say foreign particles, these are the microorganism that usually enters your body. And since it is a protection or responsible in the foreign materials, it usually transports substances, and it also a secretion of mucus and absorption of excess fluid. So what particular transportation of substances? So these are the fluid that usually, or a waste usually, that enters your body. So it transport and excretes. So that is pseudostratified columnar epithelium. While stratified squamous epithelium, so when we say stratified squamous epithelium, it is basically a type of tissue found covering and lining parts of the body. So in this tissue, the cells are flattened and it usually joined tightly together and stuck. So that is the stratified, and the major function of it is to protect the area. Okay, to protect the area, to protect the lining. So that's why it's called stratified squamous. It is also for protection because it is for covering and lining parts of the body. And it is usually a part of connective tissue. Okay? So that is oropharynx. And here we have the palatine tonsils and the lingual tonsils. Okay, so let's unlock this. So when we say palatine tonsil, these are the ones who actually located near the opening of the oral cavity into pharynx, while lingual tonsil are located on the posterior surface of your tongue, which also places them near to the opening of the oral cavity into the pharynx. So again, palatine tonsil usually located near in the opening of your oral cavity. Lingual, it is the posterior surface of your tongue. Okay, so that is the differences between palatine tonsils and the lingual tonsil. Next, we also have the laryngopharynx. So it serves as also, again, as a common passageway for food and air. So the same with oropharynx. It is lies posterior to the upright epiglottis, and it is usually extend to the larynx where the respiratory and digestive pathways diverge. So meaning, when we say laryngopharynx is usually the third region of laryngeal pharynx. It is usually begins in the epiglottis and leads down to the esophagus. And what is the major function of laryngopharynx is to regulate the passageway of air to the lungs and food to the esophagus. So meaning to say, laryngopharynx is usually can be occur in respiration and in digestion. Respiration because it is a passageway of air to your lungs, and digestion because it is a passageway of food to your esophagus. Okay, so that is laryngopharynx. Next, we have larynx. Okay, larynx or the voice box. Okay, when we say larynx or the voice box, it attaches to the hyoid bone. Anong bone? bone, and opens into the laryngopharynx superiorly or in the upper portion of the laryngeal portion. So it continues with the trachea posteriorly. So meaning to say, when we say larynx, it is basically a hollow tube. Okay, it is a hollow tube in the middle of your neck, just above your trachea. So when we say trachea, it is your windpipe. It is a middle of your neck and above of your trachea, and it is behind of your esophagus. So your larynx is the one who makes possible for you to make a sound, for you to have to read, for you to communicate. That is larynx. Why? Because larynx is your voice box. Okay? It is a voice box. It lets air pass from your throat to your trachea and onto your lungs. So that is larynx. Okay? Let's move. So these are the framework of the larynx. So larynx has a made up of 9 segment of cartilage. When we say cartilage, it is a part of a bone. We have the unpaired, which is the thyroid, epiglottic, and cricoid. Okay? Then we have paired, arytenoid, corniculate, and cuneiform. So that is the segment of cartilage. So you will just memorize the 9 segments or the unpaired or paired of the framework of larynx. So when we say unpaired, it is thyroid, epiglottic, cricoid, and paired, arytenoid, corniculate, and cuneiform.